ahead, slow it down and making no time. I gotta keep it rolling. Those windshield wipers snapping at the tempo, playing perfect rhythm with the song on the radio. I gotta keep it rolling.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the Rideshare Rodeo podcast, where we talk about all things, anything, all things. But today we're going to hit on rideshare, as well as all gig app workers should be watching this, but specifically rideshare a little bit. I am joined by the one and only Mr. John Lopez. He's been a guest. He's a friend of the shows. He's been on several times. If you guys aren't familiar with John, you will be here soon. And John, thank you for taking the time out. It looks like we're live on Twitter too. So any Twitter people, say hello. Love to see the comments if they're coming through. But,
Thank you.
John, how are you?
I'm great, Steve. How are y'all? Good afternoon from the land of Lincoln.
I'm good, man. Always a new fight every day.
Every day, and especially the multi-front fights, and that's definitely what we're in. So may everybody learn a lot from us and each other. Certainly, I know how valuable the chat interactions are too, and also anything that may come through on X. So by all means, let us have you can see both of our X handles right there as reference, and let's get to it.
Yeah. And also, please, people, get interactive today in the conversation, because I even just backstage before we were starting, this one could get juicy. I don't know. There's definitely there's gonna be some, I don't know, just information for you to take in, different opinions on all of this. So, let's start with the recap of week of July 7th. Is that a good place?
That is a very good place because so much happened there. So let's bring everyone up to speed here. The week of July 7th, or basically last week, we had 3 different bills filed in D.C. in the U.S. Senate that impacts independent contractors directly. Now, 2 of these are companion bills to the 2 that Congressman Kevin Kiley of California filed in the House back in February. So now they have Senate bill companion. They also have Senate bill numbers. So what the legislation we refer to as HR 1319, the Modern Worker Empowerment Act, the Senate version of that is S2228, Senate 2228. That is sponsored by Senator Tim Scott out of South Carolina. That is the number, that is basically the equivalent of the Kiley bill that basically ensures that independent contractors, it does not preempt state laws, but independent contractors are independent contractors, and you're empowering independent contractors to basically hang out the shingle, be your own boss. And that is what one of the bills is about that was filed. The next one that was filed was from Senator Bill Cassidy, who is of Louisiana. He's the chair of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, or the HELP Committee. And that is the equivalent of HR 1320, which is the Modern Worker Security Act. It's got a slightly different name in the Senate, but it's basically the same thing. Now, the last I checked, there are a total of 6 co-sponsors for this legislation. And since Senator Cassidy chairs the committee, then it will be likely his legislation will be up at the committee hearing that's scheduled for this Thursday morning at 10 o'clock Eastern time, 10 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday, the 17th. So that is going to be coming up. Now, I think it's only a hearing. It's not a markup. So I don't think it's going to be a recommendation to take this to the Senate floor. But it is a first step. And we definitely have a power lineup of witnesses, including our very good friend Kim Cavan. Yes. And she is going to be awesome. She's been awesome in New Jersey in the trenches there. She testified with me via Zoom in Illinois back on April 30th. And now she's moved up to the Senate. So we'll look forward to her excellent words of encouragement, and most importantly, the truth based on metrics and facts, not on hyperbole.
That is That's the 17th. That's 2 days from now.
2 days from now, correct. So mark your
we're
calendars.
like we're under 48 hours even of this happening.
Exactly. And now
So
there are
I just wanted to point that out because a lot of people know Kim on this podcast, and she will be doing that. I'll put the link after the fact to be able to check it out. But yeah, I mean, you guys should all check this out. There's a lot of big names on that platform.
Yes, and on the witness list, definitely a great one is Patricia on Wuki. She's of the Independent Women's Forum, so she will also be at the witness table, as well as the other 4 witnesses. Now, Kim's latest Substack article discusses each of the witnesses. So if you haven't seen the one that was published today on July 15th, check it out. It's like a program. It's like a play card. You can't tell the names from the numbers without a play card, So, so those are the 2 bills. And the third bill was filed from Senator Rand Paul out of Kentucky. And this has to do with retirement savings. And to my knowledge, there is no companion bill in the House. And unfortunately, that bill number has yet to be assigned. We know the bill has been filed because they did a press release last week. But
you're talking about the portable benefits?
No, not the portable benefits. This has to do with retirement savings.
Okay.
So this has to do with retirement and independent workers being able to save. And so that is something that I haven't seen a text for that yet. I know that was part of the press release, but there's no bill number. But since Senator Paul is also on that committee, the Senate Help Committee, I'm sure we'll hear about this. All 3 of the sponsors of the 3 bills filed last week are on the Senate Help Committee. So we should be hearing, if at very least, an overview of all 3 pieces of legislation. But given this is a hearing, not a markup, I think we're going to be hearing again, where are our allies concerning the freedom to choose independent work? Where are our allies at now? And where are those who feel that there needs to be some stricter controls? And we'll be hearing what their point of view is. As Kim has pointed out in her various media appearances, there seems to be a shifting of tactics, and we're seeing it go to what they're doing in New Jersey is one tactic of just trying to classify everybody by executive fiat under New Jersey's Department of Labor. And then you have what's going on in states like Massachusetts and Minnesota and California and, yes, Illinois. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Yeah. That has to do the unionization of rideshare drivers and the unionization that takes place outside of the boundaries of the National Labor Relations Act. We'll get to that later and do a deeper dive there.
It was the IDG. I was trying to think of backstage.
Okay.
The Independent Drivers Guild, if you've ever heard of them.
Yes, I have. And that's also something that when that portion of our program gets there into detail, because I've heard the term before here in Illinois. And once it became news back on June 16th, that even before Kim placed her first sets of social media posts, I said, okay, I'm already on this. And this doesn't sound like it can work here, at least not under current existing law, let alone case law. So we'll get into that deeper dive, but certainly we're going to get to, my approach has been on this is what helps the drivers. What helps the drivers, starting with rideshare drivers, but also delivery drivers, because with what I'm seeing taking place out of Massachusetts, I'm sure our friend Mike Ruby has already touched on many of these things.
Oh yeah, Mike and I hit on that a year ago and a few times since even. So
well they're saying it's about rideshare drivers, but the way they're setting up this union after the initiative was approved last fall, it's more than rideshare. It's more than rideshare, and it's clearly going to be, it's scalable. So in IT terms, it's a good thing. In this public policy arena, that may not be a good thing, because if it works for one, they're going to go for something else. And what's driving all this, in my honest opinion, is basically just based on the facts. It's the extreme elements of the far left that are pushing this. Because I can't say, well, it's Democrats or Republicans, because we have Democrats who are also against going to either the strict interpretation of the ABC test, or even going to this unionization of 1099s, which is not allowed under the National Labor Relations Act. And all that's going to come to a head before any driver is unionized, officially unionized, as being or under a contract. they have to start paying union dues, and there's going to be so many pitfalls.
And
in this.
then you have the right to work states where they won't be. I don't know. I mean, like, again, we shouldn't even be going there, because, I mean, before we move any farther, it needs to be stated that all of these companies have all said, and they're not kidding, if every state becomes like this, they leave. The churn rate is way too high. They have too many they can't be taking on W-2 employees. These are not models meant for this. Never was.
No, exactly. And yet they're trying to do this, as one of the witnesses said in New Jersey last month. They're trying to glean certain portions out of case law that would make it, quote, legal from their opinion. Well, the thing is, one set of attorneys says that's legal, another set's going to challenge that. So you're going to be seeing litigation, and a lot of it. And if there is Supreme Court precedents, and when it comes to the National Labor Relations Act, there's definitely Supreme Court case law, then it's got to work its way through the courts. And whether it's a modification of existing case law or basically a case that strikes down a previous ruling, that takes time. So one area that I've really wanted to work, because I respect rideshare drivers, they're great people, and flexibility is definitely key. Definitely, though, there have been some things, I've learned this a lot from your own podcast here, Steve. Are the apps themselves crossing the line under any classification test? Have they crossed the line out of the independent contractor classification? And I know what I've heard on your podcast. I know what I'm hearing from drivers in Illinois, and that has to come into play too. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I need it to be fixed, not just dismissed or taken to the limit where it gets dealt with in another way, because I do other things other than gig work. So I can't ever have this turn into a model of, oh, you're in a, first of all, if I was going to be, I've said this too, if I was going to be a W-2 employee, the last company I would work for, the last two are DoorDash and Uber. I could go score a better job being a W-2 anywhere else. I could throw a rock and do better. So, I mean, that says a lot, because those are the platforms I work to earn on. However, that's on my terms, when I want, how I want, where I want.
Exactly. And what we have here is, that's what independent work is about. Our terms, to market our labor the way we want to market it. Now, the app platforms have given a tool to utilize to do it faster, to do it more very systemically, but that doesn't mean the need for like a rideshare driver or a delivery driver goes away. That's how we got here in the first place. I mean, because you remember, it was taxi cabs. It was basically for deliveries. It was either, before you had Amazon.
That was in 2009, that was Travis Kalanick's reason. He was watching the taxi cab industry fall, and he knew this is not only has this been around my whole lifetime, but it's not sustainable anymore. It is actually a dumpster fire now. There's no fixing it. It's gone. And so he said, why couldn't people just use their cars? That's why it became an independent contractor model. But here we are 16 years later, and there's never been any, it's almost been like, what, you want to talk about the worker status of the gig app employees? Like, let's just kind of not deal with that right now. And now I feel like there's a lot of people going, we got to deal with this.
We do. We have to deal with it. Just basically, are those workers really still independent contractors, or are they now crossed the line to W-2 work, even though they're classified as ICs?
Yes.
We're at that point.
Yeah. And there's 27 million, even if they're part-time, there's 27 million people working on gig apps. There's under 200 million people working in the United States. So that means if you line up 8 random people, one of them does gig work.
But if you line up random people, 1 out of 4 is some type of a 1099. Not just
but
gig.
That's just even more mind-blowing to me, though. Doing gig work. Primarily 80-90% of it in the US is, food delivery and rideshare. But there are other apps too. But nonetheless, If you line up groups of random people, 1 out of every 8 does gig app work.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane.
It isn't. It's mind-boggling. It is, and it's like, well, some elements. These are the extreme elements that I've been seeing and citing. They see this as their opportunity to finally unionize 1099s that is not allowable under the National Labor Relations Act. They've tried to change the National Labor Relations Act, multiple times in the last 3 Congresses, including now. So basically 4 Congresses. And obviously a Republican-controlled Congress is not going to be amenable to this, not without significant amendments to the existing PRO Act, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. And yet the 2 Congresses where it did pass the House in the 116th and 117th, well, it passed the House with very little bipartisan. There were some Republicans voted with the Democrats, but most voted against it. And, of the Democrats that voted against the PRO Act, the first time, I think only 1 is still left in Congress, and that's Henry Cuellar of Texas. Okay. So we're at a point where we do need to have that dialogue. We do need to take this apart, not with the extremes of the PRO Act as is or nothing, or the PRO Act or bust.
Yeah, no.
Key amendments. You look at the key amendments that you must make in order to make this acceptable and fairer and allow the American worker to pursue their own dreams, to be their own boss. Yep. And the way the PRO Act is set up now under current bills, HR 20 or Senate 852, it is not conducive to freedoms that we have in this country. And that's just on the independent contractor front. There are other freedoms that are threatened by the PRO Act as written.
Yeah, 100%.
So definitely, though, Washington has a lot going on, and certainly our friend and Jedi Master, Kim Cavan, is in the middle of that. She'll have her lightsaber on. You notice how she did over the weekend in New Jersey news, how she finally used her metaphor of the Kobayashi Maru. And you and I are both old enough to remember that, the Kobayashi Maru, and the no-win scenario that the far left is trying to set up against independent contractors. And, we have to beat the no-win scenario by stopping it before it becomes in any kind of federal labor law, let alone working around federal labor law, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. So, also, though, when you're talking about independent contractorship, we don't have to, it's not about ABC law, but just even that first prong that usually whatever. No gig worker can even pass that. We're not free and clear of the hiring entity. They have they keep metrics on us. They have tier systems that say when you can't, things that like that. Like, I think they would find gig workers, gig app drivers and workers to be much more agreeable than they think if it just came to some transparency and get rid of your crap metrics.
No question. And I know a lot of your podcasts have focused a lot on DoorDash, although I know
they're
DoorDash,
an easy target. Yeah,
they're an easy target, but they're not the only target.
No, not at all. It's not like Uber's much better, and I always clarify that. So I'm not
I got to discuss Uber. I got to bring up Uber because July 4th weekend, my car broke down across state lines. I couldn't get my rental replacement until Monday, so I had to get towed. So Sunday I had to take Uber, and not city of Chicago Uber drivers, but suburban Chicago Uber drivers, and I was chatting with them, what do you think of this? And both of them, and I understand it's only 2 drivers. I'm sure there are many more who will say opposite, but both of the drivers said, I think we ought to be W-2. And I caught my ear and I said, well, are you looking to want to join a union? And the unionization is not near their top priority, but they feel that, especially after the AI, as one driver put it, that Uber put onto their app in the last year, it might even be the last few months, they're now being tracked by how much they go over the speed limit and getting dinged.
I don't know how he said getting dinged, because what he's talking about is telematics. Also, it should be known that all of these gig apps that perform those telematics do it illegally, because there are telematics companies that do this professionally. They're doing it off the fitness portion of your phone.
Okay.
That is not true telematics.
Okay, and that's a great clarification, because then now we're getting into, well, some on the extreme end of the spectrum are saying, well, let's just go ahead and put collective bargaining and do unionization for the rideshare drivers. And that's what hit Illinois last month. And now we're kind of shifting away from the DC scene and going into what's happened. And we all know from our good friend Mike Ruby, Massachusetts, they passed their initiative, the ballot question 3 last fall. It passed with 54% of the vote. Well, were they shovel ready to implement that? The answer is definitely no. And yet now you have 3 other states, Minnesota, California, and now Illinois, that are looking at trying to unionize rideshare drivers as 1099, so allow them to keep their classifications. Now, as we know, the National Labor Relations Act, which oversees the union and worker relationship through the National Labor Relations Board, after Taft-Hartley, independent contractors could not be part of union organizing. So the thinking out of Massachusetts and now out of these other 3 states has to be, well, okay, but the National Labor Relations Act doesn't regulate 1099s. Well, that's the difference of opinion, because they do say you cannot be union organizing as an independent contractor. So that's going to be another case, another constitutional challenge to this approach. And nobody has faced that yet because nobody's implemented it yet. Look at Massachusetts. Here's what they did. And, correct me if Mike said something a little bit different, but based on my own research, about a month after the initiative passed last fall.
We should let me just give a quick overview on it too. The initiative had some of the fake benefits like California does too, but the bottom line was $32.50 an hour for active time. Anytime active time is used, that is not a real unit of measurement of time. That is a unit of measurement of time from the app that you hate. So if you're saying I demand we go to active time and you're going to pay me 120% of minimum wage or $32.50 an hour, that company controls your active time. So you can go out and work 10 hours and get 1 active, meaning you made 1/20th of the normal minimum wage in Massachusetts that day. Just wanted to put that out there.
I definitely appreciate the clarification. And certainly, as I've been finding out about, well, what did Massachusetts do? Well, they formed what's known as the App Drivers Union, which is a collaboration between the local 32 BJ out of the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, and the Machinists and Aerospace Workers Union. So this is basically, you have 2 unions that are helping to start a new union, which is simply called App Drivers Union, or ADU. Right. Note the name. It's not App Rideshare Drivers Union. It's App Drivers Union. So they're already looking at scaling.
That's kind of what we were coming to, is that it's not going to, this isn't just a rideshare drivers.
Exactly. It's scalable.
It's already aimed at all of the spaces.
Right. And the app companies, the app platforms aren't exactly doing themselves favor with what they've been doing on the metrics. And as you say, utilizing, a phone's metadata to monitor driver performance. But getting back to what's going on in Massachusetts. So what it is, okay, the ADU, and certainly anybody who comments out of Massachusetts, please, give us the latest. But the ADU is currently voluntary. There's no mandatory dues right now because there's no first contract. My understanding is as soon as enough drivers are signed up and sign the card check, and then Uber and or Lyft have to come to the table at that point, but they're not near that. So here we are 7 months after the fact, and the first real collective bargaining has not taken place yet. And granted, there's startup, and I understand that, but you have the ADU. So once they reach that threshold, and then they have to do the first collective bargaining with one of the platforms, then this becomes
So
once
my
it is
my
a
guess
first
there
contract.
too, just I might be wrong, but it most likely the collective bargain will be with the Flex Association, which represents all of the platforms.
And if that's the case, if that's how they want to do it, I would not
It
be
just would be
surprised.
my guess. That's how they fought AB5 in California, was through a Flex Association. They spoke at that New Jersey thing that Kim and I played. So they are still around. They have a mouthpiece.
But here's the danger of that mouthpiece. That is right in line with something Kim first warned us about a year ago, and that is sectoral organizing and sectoral bargaining.
Yes.
You're outside of the enterprise model of the National Labor Relations Act, where it's one local, one job site. Now you're looking at an entire industry, in this context, an entire state of Massachusetts. And so now you cross a different line. Again, it's all outside the National Labor Relations Act. So there's no appeal. There's no nothing that the National Labor Relations Board can do, because this is outside of that scope. And that's assuming that this survives a court challenge at some point. I think it's going to be challenged, because there is a case law precedent, most notably the San Diego Building Trades Council versus Garmin decision. I don't know if you talked that on your show, but that is 66-year-old case law from the Supreme Court that sets up the National Labor Relations Board as the ultimate arbiter for union differences, for organized labor differences with employers. And now you're outside of that scope. Now, some are going to say, well, we can do this because it is outside the scope. But then again, someone else can equally say, wait a minute, that's precedent, that's case law. I don't believe you. And now you got a long, drawn out 1 to 2 to 3 year court process in order to interpret the law under the current context. So what does that do to help the drivers? That doesn't help the drivers at all, because now the drivers have been sold something that they are not going to get at least for another 2 years.
Yeah.
But then again, have the app companies gone beyond the IC model that they claim to follow and are doing performative metrics?
Yeah.
Should they even have that ability?
No.
So this is something where,
and it's not just because I would want that. I honestly, being a traditional independent contractor, doing lasers, lighting, production work since the 90s, and then this started in 2009. I didn't even see it in my market until 2014. So it's been 11 years of mixing this in for me. This I can honestly say if they want to keep the definition, things need to change. The metrics need to go.
Right. And maybe that's something that through their negotiation, that's why I'm kind of looking at the Washington State model. Could that be the vehicle? Because basically, from what I understand of Washington State, I think you have a little bit more insight on this than I do, but the Washington State model, which went in both in 2022 and with expanded benefits in 2023, what that did is that you're basically having your discussion and bargaining, but it's not within a union. We have the unions at the table, you have drivers at the table, you have legislators and the government at the table. Everybody's at the same table. And then when something's ready to go before the legislature for approval based on an agreement, then it's approved by the legislature, signed by the governor. Now, Washington State is a predominantly blue state, just like the other four, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Illinois, and California.
Yep.
So could that be the model, at least for now? Because we've talked about sectoral bargaining. Is that even, this is literally unprecedented, as one subject matter expert, Kim Cavan, cited back in July of last year. So it's going to be court challenges along the way. And
I guess you're right. How could the Flex Association represent them? Because they're going to all need to represent themselves. No?
Exactly. Or you're representing an industry, you're working out with an industry, and is that the model? Because what people are trying to do, they're trying to copy the European model.
Right.
And a lot of things about Europe that I'm concerned about. And John Stossel recently, I don't know if you saw his recent video about Europe.
Is it the one you reposted on Twitter?
I know I reposted. I did repost
something
that one.
of his a day or two ago. I saw, yeah.
Yeah. So he talked about labor unions and how delivery companies are not going to deliver certain things because they disagree with the politics. See, that's what the far left in our country has been trying to set up unions to do, to carry out far left policy initiatives. A big example, I remember I cited this in one of my articles last year, the Green New Deal. That's why the Democratic Socialists of America, they put out a video saying, we organize in order to save the planet through the unions. And right. That's an extreme element. And I don't believe the rank and file, definitely not all of the rank and file, are in agreement with that approach to organizing. You know, it needs to be the back to basics of collective bargaining, contract administration, period. That's where traditional labor unions have worked in partnership with management. Now, our friend, Dr. Leah Palagashvili, about a week after her testimony before Illinois via Zoom, she published another paper because, you know, with the tariffs and everything coming back.
She's the one with Mercatus, right?
Correct. Mercatus at George Mason University.
Yeah.
So she published some fresh research of, well, it's great that we're trying to bring manufacturing back. Can we learn from some of the mistakes made in the past when the unions, and there's some recent examples, UPS is a big recent example about unions receiving so much, you know, drivers making $170,000 a year, but how many were laid off after that collective bargaining agreement was ratified? And there are other examples too, and anyone can find Dr. Palagashvili's research. I believe it's dated May the 7th. So I remember it was like just a week after the April 30th testimony in Illinois. So that brings us to what my approach is in Illinois. I'm looking at Massachusetts. I'm looking at these other states. Now, I know the Chicago Hispanic Chamber of Commerce president and CEO, a gentleman named Jaime DiPolo. He put an op-ed out in Crane Chicago Business around June 23rd and stated, well, let's just get all the stakeholders together. Well, that's kind of what the Washington State solution was all about. And let me tell you what's happening in Illinois. Now, hopefully, if you have some Illinois rideshare drivers listening, by all means, comment or ask your questions.
We just had a Washington State one jump in.
Okay.
So just letting you know.
Thank you. So, but let's look at Illinois. What was promised is, okay, on June the 16th, you had a controversial vote for the city of Chicago, comparable to like the city of Seattle or the city of Minneapolis, was going to do something for rideshare drivers. It was turning into a very controversial vote on the Chicago City Council. There's 50 aldermen plus the mayor, so 51 people. And people were counting the votes a little over a month ago, and the votes were very tight. You didn't know how this ordinance, it was an ordinance to raise drivers' base pay, etc. So what happened was the alderman, I think, I want to say his name is Michael Rodriguez, they worked out a deal with Uber where they say, we're going to just take the statewide. And they definitely cited the Massachusetts example. And the other gentleman, Jaime DiPolo, he cited Minnesota. Well, if you look at Minnesota, all they do is say, we're going to use Massachusetts. So it all comes down to Massachusetts. And so they feel that by their count, there are 100,000 rideshare drivers, Uber and Lyft in Illinois. That's their numbers. And they're going to say, okay, now we're going to pass this in Springfield at the state capitol. Question is when? Because right now, for those who don't know, Illinois state legislature, the General Assembly, their spring session ended at the very first day of June. And they're not due to be back in Springfield until what's known as the fall veto session in mid to late October. Now, the biggest crisis that's facing the state of Illinois, particularly in the Chicagoland area, is definitely not rideshare drivers. It is to do with the transit systems, particularly what's known as the regional transportation authority.
You're not one of the rare states that has a governor switch this year, though, like New Jersey or Virginia or.
Our governor's not term limited, so Governor Pritzker's already going to run for a third term.
Right, but that's not even this year, is it?
Correct. No. That's okay, New Jersey, Virginia.
Right. Well, there's like three of them.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like three other. There's other.
Right. I'm not sure who the third one is. Definitely New Jersey. Governor Murphy's term limited, and Governor Youngkin is term limited. They're only limited to one term in Virginia. So,
Right.
but getting back to Illinois, what's happening this fall is, well, if the deficit, and we're talking like a $771 million deficit for the Chicago Transit Authority, the suburban bus lines, and the Metro train authorities, you're looking at what's known as the fiscal cliff. That is the number one priority because they left Springfield back in June. So you're looking at massive layoffs and service cuts unless the state finds funding. Some of the funding ideas weren't very appealing. One's known as the delivery tax for anybody, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Uber Eats, whether it's DoorDash. It's like no matter who it is, it's a matter of you'll be subject to a $1.50 tax. It's known as the pizza tax because it's food delivery. So so there was no action on that to complete this in both chambers of the General Assembly. So there are only 6 days of this veto session this October. That is by far, because that hits January 1st of next year. So basically the rideshare drivers aren't going to see any movement. Now, a month ago, they were told they were going to file a bill. I have been tracking this. I have not seen a bill filed, or at least not filed yet. And what are they going to base it on? My guess is either Massachusetts, Minnesota, maybe California, AB 1340. I think that's the bill number for the independent contractor unionization out in California. But we haven't seen a bill yet. So, but the earliest is going to even be touched is going to be January of next year. Now, why couldn't we do something to maybe make sure that this is shovel ready? Make sure that all the parties can talk, how novel, let's all discuss what we want to see in this. Let's discuss the real legal challenges. If this is tied up in the courts for 2 to 3 years, you're not helping drivers.
Yeah,
and yes, basically what I've heard from you, Steve, and several other dashers, there are other app-based platforms that need some scrutiny.
Yeah.
And
for the most part, let's be honest, they all do. And they all need to lead, at least, even if it's just kind of getting some of the even small startup ones in line before they become big. Like I see them making some of the mistakes, and then it's like, well, those mistakes will grow into other ones. Seen this. Let's just make sure you do it right out of the gate.
Right. And that brings up the third option. I mentioned 2 options. One is the Massachusetts option. The other is the Washington State option. And as far as for Illinois, now there is a third option, which not a lot may agree with, but it's something that Illinois did back in 2007. And that's what I've referred to as the carve in. Because you know what carve out is, you exempt certain industries and professions from like AB 5.
Yep.
Well, what I've looked at is, Illinois passed its first worker classification for the construction industry back in 2007. It was implemented in 2008. And what they did, and this came out at the subject matter hearing in Springfield, where I testified at in April. And what happened was they used, at the time, the General Assembly used a then current 2005 research from the University of Missouri that said that construction industry was having misclassification, true misclassification. So the General Assembly set up what's known as the Employee Classification Act. It was approved and implemented. And here we are 17, 18 years later. And now is Illinois at a time where maybe for a legally defined app-based business, does that kind of and Illinois does not use the strict ABC test. I'm very clear on that. We use more of an ABCD test. It's not the strict ABC test. It is an ABCD test, but it's not. But it's only confined to certain industries that you can prove there is real misclassification on. And like you said earlier, Steve, they'll just threaten to leave the state. Some might say, let them. You mentioned the start.
I've been through that side of the fight. I mean, I've seen that it happens in every state they do this in. At some point, it's just how loud does it get? But I've seen it get pretty loud. I've seen that group get pretty loud. Like, let them. But a thing, I mean, like we only have a couple examples. One is Miami, and it was too short-lived to even dissect. The other is Austin, where the gig apps actually did leave for a year. There were startups all over the place. There were already 3 or 4 rideshare startups that were already not only coming in because of it, but they were already in Austin doing things. And so everybody thought this is their chance. We're going to see these startups bloom. Without the giants around, they failed bad. It's like for whatever reason, without, you'd think like, okay, there's a hole in this and these people can fill it. They couldn't. Their business went down, in fact.
Okay. And those are other examples to bring to that discussion table if we look at the Washington State for Illinois. It's just more of...
Well, it's the only one we have is Austin. It's the only place where they've said, if you don't do this, we're going to leave. They didn't do it, and they left. Everywhere else, even as you know, in California during AB 5, went into effect January 1st of 2020. And Uber and Lyft were told to be, you guys got to get this figured out. These same problem that all the people we know were faced with. These are all employees now. Deal with it. And they demanded that Prop 22 go on that November ballot.
Yes.
So they had till the end of the month. It literally is there 31 days in January. Okay, maybe there is. But on the last day of January was the deal and the end of the deal. It came down to, it was after 11 p.m. I mean, I don't want to say it was to the minute, but it was after 11 p.m. when the deal was finally made, where California said, fine, you can have Prop 22 on the ballot, keep operating how you do, because they knew you're going to disrupt our transportation system in a way that we've already been beat up enough in the last few years.
And didn't we learn out of California how easy it is to beat up your supply chain? Because when the independent truckers can't be part of the solution, this is something that's been brought up in New Jersey.
Yes.
With the Port of New York and New Jersey.
Yeah, Kim and I tackled into that.
Oh, that, and you already had the case in point of California.
Yeah.
Remember when the independent truckers shut down the ports of Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Oakland back in mid-2022 when the Supreme Court refused to hear the California Truckers Association? It got people's attention, especially.
I remember when one guy threw a wrench in dynamics.
And I don't remember that part there.
Yeah, if you look pre-pandemic, the dynamics decision was brought up over and over during Prop 22. But it was one person. Even Kim has said, or Karen said that. Mike has said that it was one person that filed a complaint for unemployment when they were independent contractor, and the whole thing was like a setup. It was weird.
Yeah, but you see, we have. I remember when I had to respond to a state legislator back in April. I mean, we're not making this up. We're not going hyperbole. We're talking about facts which have happened, particularly out of California, and we don't have to rely on this. Isn't fantasy. This is reality because it's happened. And
I mean, John, you've heard me for how many years put out the challenge publicly on public platforms like YouTube and Twitter. Please show me any jobs AB5 created. Any. Nobody can.
I try to take it a step further. Well, we have Dr. Palagashvili and her team's great research, more than one research study. Show me the opposite. Show me an empirical data study. And we saw how our friend Kim Cavan went and took apart the National Employment Law Project back in May. I think it was May 20th when that took place. And she took them apart. I mean, and she said the right thing, which is the truth. They won't show you the latest data because they don't like what it's telling you.
Yeah,
they don't like
exactly. She made sure to drive it in. It's not that it's not there or accessible. They just don't like the results.
Exactly, they don't like the results. And I say with this, with the, because I was saying this with what we're seeing here with rideshare. Well, there are options we could take. Leaders need to step up, get out of the talking points and the narratives of the extreme elements of the far left. Look at the reasonable common sense things that we've seen out of the 3 senators that filed the bill, Senators Cassidy, Scott, and Paul. Look at Congressman Kiley's legislation, and let's just get these passed. And keep in mind, there's no preemption. So you're not taking rights away from the states to
Yeah.
work on their own solutions as they see fit, but don't let the states listen to extremists pushing European-style sectoral organizing, sectoral bargaining that has infiltrated much of our organized labor's leadership. I mean, I see that here in Illinois. I mean, SEIU Local 1. I mean, I even pointed this out in an article I published at the end of last month. Go look at their platform. Sectoral victories, trying to reach more workers, as in 1099s, that have been unreachable under the National Labor Relations Act. That's what this is about. That's their end game. But good news is there's a common sense end game that we need to put into public policy. And that's why I'm seeing 1099s are more and more. Look what happens in New Jersey. As you said, New Jersey has a governor's election and state legislators' elections this year, this fall. And the Republican nominee for governor, Jack, I want to say this right, Chattarelli. I'm saying how it's spelled. He has said if this goes in, he's going to have it repealed. If this New Jersey executive fiat goes in, he will repeal it. Look who he's up against. Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill. She's voted for the PRO Act twice and co-sponsored it 2 other times. She is a freelance buster.
She is a pro-union master.
Congress, and we thought, our friend Kim was in the swing district with another far leftist, in Susan Altman last fall. Now you're seeing Mikey Sherrill, who's a strong PRO Act proponent, and that's the governor's election. And there are 1.7 million 1099s in the state of New Jersey, based on the numbers that we're hearing. Now it's time for us to just speak up, not just with public comment, which that's important. We all should support Kim and the rest of the.
Yeah, and another link I will put in the bottom. I've been sharing that as much as possible. Get those public opinions in. Also, there's a group, saveindependentwork.org. I'll put that link in as well, guys. These are links that take you 1 minute. 1 minute. You just kind of go, you read it. If you agree with it, just add you don't have to put a phone number or anything. First, last name, email, boom. Just do it. Help out. If you agree with the comment. If you don't do it. We would never ask you to do something you don't agree with.
But in addition to the comments, now it is an election issue at the highest state office in New Jersey, governor. And you remember how close he came to flipping that seat 4 years ago in the election. He came within 4 percentage points, less than 100,000 votes. That's close. And so if that's one that we could pull off, that's an example that we can tell the nation, saying, you've messed with independent contractors for far too long. Let's do a common sense, bipartisan solution. And let's stop playing with European models and sectoral organizing and sectoral bargaining, and let Americans work the way they want to work to be their own boss. Yes. Let's just keep it that simple.
Yeah.
But the far left, it is coming from the far left. I mean, make no mistake about it. They're pushing this extreme agenda of, like we see in the PRO Act as written, try to repeal right to work state, basically apply preemption against states that have chosen right to work either through legislation or through a constitutional amendment. That's their thinking. And that's
do we want to hit on the Megan Sergey samples? Or
yeah, let's do that, because this talks about the Washington State. If you have that clip handy, let's check a look.
I do. And people, so this is 3 minutes, you guys. Right afterwards, we'll be right back on the other side. But this kind of, John will tie it into how it fits into the 3 options we've been talking about, and and all of you guys, if you've already seen it, I know it's a teeth grinder for all of you out there doing the hustle and stuff, but just try and bear through her words for a minute here.
Good morning. My name is Megan Sergey Samples, and I serve as Lyft's Director of Public Policy. We appreciate the opportunity to comment on this proposal, which has profound implications for app-based platforms and the thousands of independent drivers who partner with them. I'm here to share Lyft's opposition to this proposed interpretation of the ABC test that reveals a deep misunderstanding of how and why drivers work with platforms like ours. The proposal substantively changes the ABC test, interpreting each prong in unprecedented ways. and imposes rigid presumptions that ignore long-established case law, New Jersey's Transportation Network Company Act, and industry nuance. Critically, the proposal disregards the desires of workers to maintain independence. 93% of drivers in New Jersey support a model where drivers remain independent contractors while receiving new benefits. This Independence Plus benefits model was codified for TNC drivers in Washington State in 2022 via historic compromise with labor unions led by Democratic legislators. Our goal is to seek a similar legislative solution here in New Jersey. The department's proposal wholly disregards the realities of workers in New Jersey. Drivers oppose becoming employees because the vast majority of them are looking for flexible income opportunities that traditional employment simply cannot provide. Nearly all of them drive because of the independent contractor status and not despite it. Drivers are parents, students, retirees, caregivers, and small business owners. 92% of New Jersey drivers on the platform have another job or are a student. For them, driving is a convenient way to earn extra money on nights, weekends, or whenever works best for them. They play an absolutely essential role in our economy and in our communities. We urge you to listen to the overwhelming majority of drivers who want to remain independent contractors. Additionally, it's worth noting that proposed rules conflict with the TNC Act statutory framework, which was enacted by the legislature to govern rideshare services and recognizes the independent status of TNC drivers. Instead, the proposed rules selectively codify portions of generalized case law while pointedly listing TNC drivers as an example of workers who cannot meet prong B. This effectively prejudges all rideshare drivers as employees as a whole in direct contravention of the TNC Act. With the TNC Act, the legislature struck a careful balance to protect TNC riders and drivers while maintaining the independent contractor model that underlies the rideshare industry. DOL's proposed regulations would attempt to override that balance. As stated earlier, we would like to present a legislative solution that works for New Jersey. We propose a portable benefit account where drivers can contribute up to 4% of their quarterly earnings to an individual account where Lyft would match those contributions. Those funds could then be used for benefits such as health insurance, paid time off, and retirement contributions. Drivers fully control this account. They can choose their benefits and providers, and if an individual decides to no longer drive on the platform, they will continue to have access to the funds. Portable Benefits offers drivers the security of healthcare and retirement resources without sacrificing the flexibility and independence that drew them to the platform in the first place. Thank you for your sincere interest in this matter. Lyft remains committed to exploring a legislative solution that works for all parties, but especially drivers.
Definitely a lot there. And drivers, the last thing you said, especially for drivers, not the unions, not even the businesses themselves.
And this is where I need to say to the people, this is where you need to disconnect a little bit from your anger, because I think I referred to this as a very, very, very temporary alliance, where it's like to talk about what all of us in here are talking about all the time. Listen, why can't these guys just kick their metrics out? Why can't they just let us be independent contractors since they say we are? We're not even asking for the world. Just let us be what we're supposed to be by your own terminology. So in that sentence, you have to agree with parts of what she said. I don't agree with her. I don't agree because I know what she's saying, and we've seen this, and it never happens right. And it's always a benefit for Lyft, but it never passes along to the driver. I think that becomes a big part of the problem.
And what also could become a big part for Illinois rideshare drivers, as what was pointed out from the city of Chicago, Uber agreed not to stand in the way of the statewide legislation here in Illinois. Lyft did not. Right. Now, if Lyft had a seat at the table, it's been very nebulous in the local media here in Chicago. And yet, if this was to be taken to the statewide level, then, as I said earlier, I think it's more than rideshare drivers that have needs that need to be addressed, metrics. I mean, it's a matter of if it's just rideshare drivers, at some point they're going to have to be addressed. I mean, what about the Dashers? What about the Instacart? What about the Grubhub?
I would think that would become like a precedence at some point. I mean, they're under FTC investigation in like 4 different worlds right now. There's a RICO case going on in Henderson, Nevada. So they have a $1 billion lawsuit, DoorDash does, from the FTC right now.
And
I mean, this is not games anymore, guys. I know that you still feel like the pawn working these platforms. But they gotta start rethinking the old model of whatever, we can just take the lawsuits, because the lawsuits are not stopping.
Right. They're not stopping. And then in Illinois, that's where you have the other options. Like I said, most states, it's like a one or the other. It's like a take it or leave it. What I've been communicating here with, through local legislators and with Springfield is there's other options too. Because I remember discussing the carve-in approach that basically takes the existing law, expands it from just the construction industry and apply it to, as the statute would define, what is an app-based platform. So any driver, regardless
now
of platform.
Realize John's talking specific to the Chicago market.
Right. Well,
right now, but we all have our own ways that we could apply things like this. So I'm just pointing it out there.
No, it's great to point out but once they kicked this down to Springfield, this left exclusively the city of Chicago. Now it's a statewide issue. And as their proponents would say, there are about 100,000 Uber and Lyft drivers across the state of Illinois. And so, okay, but you factor in everybody else, you're talking more than 100,000. And why don't we do it right the first time if this is what's right for Illinois? And again, this goes back to where I testified that independent contractors need protection. Yet one way I suggested it is that put us all under the IRS test or the common law test.
Yes.
And yet, if there are metrics that back up real questionable business practices that result in misclassification, we're definitely seeing evidence from these app platforms, then it's time to maybe expand the ABCD test to other industries besides construction. And that's another thing.
None of us want to hear that. Trust me. If you don't know what we're talking about, that test is never a good thing. It gets applied to us. It's not going to work. But this is again where I plead out to, because they listen to the podcast, DoorDash, Uber, anybody from any of those companies listening, you would be very surprised to learn not how far you could take advantage of us anymore. We're all pretty aware of it. And we tell other people. So it's all out there. But the problem is that, or what you don't know is that we would be very acceptable to accept some independent contractor terms, allowing you to label us as such by just doing a few things that you should be doing anyway.
Exactly. And whether it's strict ABC test or a watered down ABC test or ABCD test, whatever you call it, they've got to see that there are real grievances that drivers are making. I heard from both sets of drivers. I had that one Sunday. The fare structure and what the driver receives and pays become inverted. It used to be 6% of fares in Illinois for suburban drivers. Now it's less than 40%, if even that high. And even trips to O'Hare Airport I'm in the northwest suburbs. O'Hare is on the northwest side of Chicago. That is now, you make less than $20 for an O'Hare commute. And I'm sure it's that way in other cities with other airports, but this is one I'm getting from Illinois. So
have you never been approached by a driver who said, hey, if you cancel, I'll do it for this?
I'm sorry?
Okay, so like let's say I'm driving Lyft in Chicago. I see a ping come through to take you to O'Hare.
Okay.
I see that I'm going to make $22. I know Lyft is making three digits on this plus, at least $100, if not $125 plus. So I know John is paying $125. I'm on my way to pick him up. I arrive at you and I say, hey, I'll do this ride for $50 right now for you, which is twice what I was going to make on the platform if you want, and I'll cancel it for you so it doesn't ding your account. Doesn't that help you wake up to go, wait, I just paid $125. You're telling me that you were going to make $22 and there was a $102 service fee for that $22 service?
It would definitely wake up somebody driving. I mean, not just the driver, but the customer.
That's what I'm saying.
I hear it. I hear it. Not. I'm following it fully. It's almost like, with this.
I mean, businesses can run how they want as long as they're keeping it all legal, but they're not. The titling of the independent contractor and they've got away with it for decades. I think that from my talking with them, they are starting to understand that they can't run from it anymore.
No, and they can't. And that's one good thing that's come out with this discussion is that, right, the time of running from it is over. And
Yes.
I don't want to see us go to sectoral bargaining because I don't want to see us following honestly, some very bad examples from Europe. And yet you're at this crossroads here that if people don't come to a table and literally what's best for the drivers and what should be best for you, but definitely what's best for the drivers, we're on our way down a very dark path of either European style or just Illinois having another classification test.
And this is Mr. Gary Middleton, one of his apps. Maximo is on my hat. Safety tools for gig workers. Perfect example. He's in here today because we're not allowed to use safety tools for gig workers by terms of service of the apps, which what it does is if you only have 4 seconds to accept a rideshare ride and you're in an intersection, you can set your parameters so it auto accepts, auto declines based on your parameters. Nothing to do with the company and their offer. It just does that decision for you so you don't get in an accident. Okay. Well, that we're all allowed to be free and clear of the hiring entity with the tools we use, with the mapping we do, with everything. Safety should definitely be on there. Just pointing it out.
No,
his app isn't allowed, and neither are a lot of others because they help drivers.
Well, it's one of those things that if it helps drivers, then why are these platforms trying to exert more control? Because now you get into the A prong.
Yeah.
Now you get into the A prong here. And it's like if you exert too much control, and that was the feedback. And I understand it's only two different drivers. Yeah. But when they're saying the same thing, that kind of caught me off guard.
Yeah. I mean, they want you to use in-app navigation. However, they provide you external ones. Like if you'd rather link it to your Waze or Google Maps, we understand we'd rather use Ubers. But in the terms of service, it says you can't use other external mapping. And in their app, it allows you to pick. I mean, you guys got to pull it together, man. If you're watching, you have to pull it together. Because otherwise, we're talking about 27 million potential people who work not having an ability to work anymore.
Exactly. So
I know it sounds like so dramatic, but it's not.
Well, all the states are looking at this now in their respective unique ways. And right now there's at least 5 of them. California, Minnesota, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Illinois. And by all means, come to a table, come to all the tables, come to the Illinois table, listen to what we're hearing, and how are you going to change it just in Illinois? Hopefully this is good business to reapply elsewhere. So come to the table, come let us reason together. And the same goes for people trying to push unionization of 1099s. That is a honestly bordering on the narcissistic power and control model.
Yes.
That some unions were better known. And it's going to bring mental health into this somewhere. That is.
Yeah. By the way, before he does, as he's doing this, guys, he's what I would call an expert in this. He has enough background in mental health, and I think I even put it in the thumbnail and description. So,
hey, thank you. And yes, I still serve there. I'm still the president of the board, and I am looking at these opportunities, turn them into opportunities, solve the problems, and then you have real freedom in the hands of the workers, not the unions, but the workers. And if it's something that helps the unions through the workers, so be it. But none of this power and control, top down, leave out the rank and file, because the rank and file, we saw the rank and file speak last November. And people were not very happy with definitely some of the far left. But when you always bypass the rank and file and go with the bosses, the rank and file has every right to walk with their feet. And they did that in several states last fall.
Sure.
They did that.
Yeah. So, I mean, but here's California, part of their agreement in Prop 22, which was the first one in 2020, late 2020, says that they can't do that. And that's why they're back at the Ninth Court Circuit or Appeals Court in California going, we want the right to organize. It's like that's the one thing you told them they could have or that you wouldn't do. They were going to give you benefits, 120% of minimum. Again, they love signing these. Lyft and Uber, they love these because these are just a joke to them.
Well, look at what they're
Active time
trying.
means now they just control your active time. They don't create customers to make sure you're active for 100% of the time.
No,
They're just going to distribute more and go screw you.
They're trying to do this through AB 1340. And again, you have the multiple California laws, whereas the other states don't have that. The other states have a situation where unionization generally works through the National Labor Relations Act. You take that out of the equation and you're heading for a European model, which is questionable by many people at best. The European sectoral organizing. And that's why, one thing in my articles, I know I wrote an article last month saying, you got to know what this is. And our good friend Kim Cavan laid this out beautifully a year ago. If you haven't seen it,
freelancebusting.com.
July 22nd, look for the July 22nd article where she first talks about this. And she also cited the SEIU, the Service Employee International Union, and their platform of sectoral victories, reaching workers that we've not been able to reach before, mainly because of that pesky National Labor Relations Act. Isn't it an irony? The act that establishes the organized labor turned out to be something that stopped organized labor because of Taft-Hartley.
Right.
That's the 1099s.
Yeah. And so, John, I mean, as we wrap this up, here's I think that, I always try and find, I had a couple others, but I think I want to go with something else today. I always try and have a last thing for you. So after this conversation today, let's pretend that I am DoorDash, Uber, everybody going, okay, Mr. Lopez, we're giving you this time. We heard you on the podcast and we'd like to hear what could we do? What are your suggestions? Or, you know what I mean? They're all here. It's not one person with the Flex Association. They're all here with their biggest representatives, maybe even CEOs, whatever makes it better for you for the answer. But what do you tell them on what to do, given what you know? I know some of it is not, you haven't been in the trenches of the rideshare, but I think you're starting to get it. You've watched this, you're hearing from.
Okay, the first thing I say, listen to your drivers. Listen to your drivers on what has honestly honked them off, pardon the pun. Look at what they are having issues with. I heard your AI that got put in there to track their performance. You're tracking. Look at prong A.
Fake telematics. Not only telematics, fake.
Right. And whether it's based off of your app or based off of the metadata of your drivers on how they access your app, you're still putting performance metrics.
Yep.
Even if it's not through your app directly.
But then they have the other ones too. Acceptance rate. Did you are you accepting over 90% of what we're sending you? No,
exactly.
Because I only accept what makes sense to me.
Exactly. You choose, just like an independent trucker will choose the routes they want to drive,
yes,
and the cargo they want to carry for how far they want to do it. A true independent trucker has the freedom to do that, and app-based drivers need to have a greater degree of freedom to obviously you're either taking product or people, delivering product, or you're transporting people. But listen to the drivers is the first thing I would say. Don't listen to a group claiming to represent drivers. Listen to drivers directly. Have focus groups across the state of Illinois. We had a terrific workshop nearly 2 years ago.
Real focus groups, though, not the ones where they line up a bunch of people that they like.
Exactly.
I don't know how to say that correctly, but
basically you want a random derived set of focus group participants. You don't want any stooges in there who are doing this for the unions or doing it for the app-based platforms themselves. You want the workers' perspective. What are the people, the men and women
100%.
in the trenches, literally going through to do this?
Yep.
That's where I would start.
Yep. So, I mean, yeah, because, and I guess the only thing I would add to that, because it's, as always, great answer, but like somehow emphasizing this isn't a joke. This, you keep saying you'll shut down, and I am a believer in that. Gary Middleton's in here. A bunch of people are too. And thank you all for joining. But I want to say that I honestly don't only believe it, I know it. It can't work. I've run businesses. You can't run the payroll on a churn rate of people who sometimes turn on an app for 2 hours and quit. You can't make these people all W-2. They know this. They've even said it. They've said, we'll leave. And that's the one we'll leave you have to believe. Because why would they stay? That's why they like these stupid Prop 22. They don't love them, but they'll take that any day over the reality of just giving us transparency and letting us be contractors as they claim we are.
And the good news is Illinois doesn't have a Prop 22. So when it comes to having to do this in Illinois, now I'd rather do it proactively, encourage Illinois legislators to do this proactively, not reactively. Granted, the big priority in the fall is going to be saving the Chicago Transit Authority, but you want a shovel-ready piece of legislation that's been agreed to. Look at the Washington State example, and to be able to go into early January, quickly get this approved, and then as quick as possible, bring benefits to the drivers in the best mechanism using one of the three options we outlined here to help the drivers.
Yeah.
It's about the drivers.
Even if it's a midnight hour surprise fourth option, nonetheless, there has to be an option. What we're doing right now is not an option.
Correct.
Is that a good way to put it? Because
that is a great way to end it. Status quo is no longer acceptable.
Yeah. And I think even they get it. There's no joke there. They get it. They know this is over in this way. So, well, thank you, John. I mean, I could go for hours with you.
Thanks.
I have so much other stuff here, but I think we covered a lot. And
it's necessary because this is a complex issue. It's got multiple fronts. We'll see what's going to happen in Washington on Thursday morning. And then
you guys watch again. I'll post that in the link. I'll post that in the description after this.
And we'll see what's going to happen in this fall's 2025 general elections in the state of New Jersey, especially if this rule goes through. You never know. We might see a surprise option. It might get pulled. Maybe the feedback they receive is enough to convince. It's hard to say that we'll do that with an outgoing administration that's term limited, a lame duck, basically. But you never know. Get those comments in, as Steve said. Let's use those comments and get the comments in to Trenton, and let's help our allies in New Jersey. And then let's just show the nation that independent contractors are speaking with a consistent voice, that we want to protect our freedom to market our labor the way we want to market it, not the way someone else says we should.
And right there is spot on. We'll end it with that, because that I sync up with them wholly. I think all you guys do too, no matter how you feel about any of the parts of this discussion, that we all sync up on. That is our right, as that. And so, John, again, for those of you on Twitter, I don't know how many of you are. I know we have a lot of Twitter viewers today, which is great. Thank you for watching,
Thank you.
as well as on YouTube. But you can find John, if you are not on Twitter, or you're watching this on the replay, or you're listening to the audio podcast, you can find John on Twitter at John Lopez _PPC. And again, it'll be in the show notes, so that link will be there as well. He's not just this smart when he comes on here, he's this smart every day. So, John, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure, Steve. And our conversations. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve, for the opportunity, and let's go get them.
Yeah.
Let's go get them.
Thank you, John, and we'll see you again here next time soon. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.
She was just a baby.